All right, no sound.
How's that? Can the people on Zoom hear us now?
Yeah, better.
Yes, you can.
Okay, sorry about that. We were muted. Sorry about that. You'll get an email tomorrow requesting that if you have a suggestion for a chapter award, something exceptional, we want to hear about it, and we'd like to recognize those projects, those people, and the definitions of all the awards will be in the email. Don't be shy about submitting names, projects, et cetera. Thank you. Another plug for AEE Boston, June 7th and 8th, and acknowledgement of all our corporate sponsors, Dual Fuel, DNV, Innovative Power, Lados, Npower, Metergy, Utilivisor, Train, NYSERDA, C-Power, Fisher Energy, EIS, EMAX Systems, Aramark, NYIT, and Thermax. With that, I'll introduce Phyllis Kessler, of our board members and our chair for today's meetings, who will introduce the session and our speakers. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for coming. Our topic for tonight is titled Legislative Updates, Federal, New York State, and New York City. But since the Inflation Reduction Act was enacted within this last year, we wanted to focus primarily on the tax effect, or how the different tax acts are impacting buildings and building owners and others within New York State and New York City. So we have two speakers for you. One is Jennifer Carney, who I'm going to introduce first, and the other is Josh Steinmetz, who we'll introduce when Jennifer is finished. Jennifer, who I believe some of you know and may know quite well, actually, is the president of Environ Energy, which was formerly Gotham 360. And Environ is one of the nation's most respected energy advisory firms. Prior to launching her practice, Jennifer served as the director of energy programs for New York Presbyterian Hospital, which is the largest not-for-profit non-sectarian hospital in the United States. When she was there, Jennifer managed a $70 million energy procurement portfolio, which included power, renewables, natural gas, and fuel oil. In addition, she oversaw the development and construction of an 8-megawatt synchronous cogen system, which was the first of its kind in the borough of Manhattan. From that, the hospital saved approximately $11 million annually and received ongoing recognition by the EPA as an Energy Star Partner of the Year. So I would like everybody to welcome Jennifer. And come on up.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see so many familiar faces. Some of you I haven't seen in a long time, and it's great to see.
Excuse me, I need you to speak into the mic.
Okay,
The guys, women out on the,
gotcha.
thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much for having me. Just a quick agenda. We're going to be doing like a very high level look at local law 97,
I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the ins and outs, but we're really going to be talking about how some of these other programs are assisting building owners with the development of mitigation strategies for local law 97 in New York City, but how these programs are also supporting projects outside of New York City. We're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the practical elements of the IRA, how we're seeing the IRA influence projects across the country, really, but definitely concentrated and focused in the Northeast, and a lot of activity in New York City. The Con Ed Clean Heat Program, PACE financing, and just some overall trends on federal and local policy. These are the learning objectives. So really going through the fundamentals of local law 97, who is subject to it, what you need to do to comply, reviewing the IRA, the takeaways, the incentives, determining how the IRA project eligibility and cost benefits are monetized for different types of building owners, whether you're for-profit, not-for-profit, looking at the way that Con Edison is really evolving their incentive programs. It's funny because the different factions within Con Edison actually feel a little bit differently about the trend towards electrification, but we're going to be really talking about the incentive projects to try to incentivize and support building owners who want to move through that process. We're going to talk about PACE financing, how this element of the broader legislative package that also brought us local law 97 is bringing a new way to finance some of the larger projects. And then looking at a high level of trends between, federal and local to prepare for future regulation. Local law 97, as we all know, it has established greenhouse gas emission limits on all buildings 25,000 square feet or more. This is going to go into effect in 2025 based on the calendar year usage in 2024. Depending on your building type, you're assigned a carbon emissions over your square foot or your carbon emission intensity limit. That limit is going to be driven by your building's classification. And then there are fines for carbon exceedance of $268 per metric ton per square foot. This is all part of a broader piece of legislation, the Climate Mobilization Act. We have limits set in 2024. We have more stringent limits set in 2030. There are about 50,000 buildings across the city that are affected by this law. Probably about 60% of the city's building area, split between roughly 60% on residential, 40% on commercial. Covered buildings that exceed the annual emissions limit are facing fines. Covered buildings that are beneath the annual buildings limit are facing no additional benefits except for no fines. There is certain flexibility on compliance through purchasing the new Tier 4 renewable energy credits. Unfortunately, those credits are probably not going to become commercially available for sale until 2026. So the first couple of years of the law being in place will not have that mitigation strategy available to building owners. There are also carbon offsets available, capped at 10% of your carbon exceedance. And there is opportunity to reduce your purchase of ground power through installation of clean distributed energy resources, specifically renewable solar. We're working with the DOB on some clarifications around the way that they intend to treat solar net metering, which is allowed in New York City, but is not really addressed with any sort of clarity in the law. We expect that to come out of a future rulemaking with DOB. We're looking for a 40% citywide emission reduction by 2030, looking at a baseline in 2005. Most buildings have some sort of carbon exceedance. We're not working with that many customers who are in the clear in 2030. Some of them are certainly below the initial limits, but I couldn't believe 2024 came up so fast. 2030 will be here before we know it. And I think a lot of building owners are counting on some changes to this law to happen before then. But I think that we need to plan for what the law says today. The determination of emissions limits is essentially taking your scope 1 and 2 emissions, which are any on-site fossil fuels that are combusted on the property, any grid electricity that's purchased, converting those energy types into carbon and putting that over your square feet, looking at your building type and your cap, and then determining if you're over or under. The Inflation Reduction Act is a piece of significant climate change legislation at the federal level. There's $369 billion in climate change programs and incentives. This is established over a 10-year timeframe, which is pretty significant because one of the ways that the benefits are being monetized is through the investment tax credit. And the investment tax credit prior to this piece of legislation was something that was on a scaling down schedule. So every year would be worth a little bit less. And it needed to be renewed every year. And depending on United States Congress to pass legislation every year and renew this credit, created additional risk around developers. And that risk gets translated into customers, and risk always translates into cost premiums. So the establishment of a 10-year window with a value stack is a real significant change, which is providing more financial stability to the development community who are working to assemble the projects on behalf of building owners. There's an expansion of the tax credits where there is now a value stack. You're starting at 30%. And based on different criteria, like using prevailing wage, whether or not you're in a low income or an energy community, you can build on that 30%, get up to 50% of an investment tax credit. Something else that's new in the IRA that prior to it was not available was the availability for a not-for-profit to take advantage of an ITC directly. So we work personally with a lot of nonprofits, a lot of universities, a lot of hospitals. The energy intensity of those kinds of loads, whether it's a research load within a university or the energy intensity of healthcare, has made them extremely good from the perspective of load to do projects like on-site generation, whether it's cogeneration, solar, microgrids. But ITC credits could only be monetized by a not-for-profit if they were working with a for-profit entity who could take that tax credit and monetize it. So a third-party DBOOM project. There's something called the direct pay option for not-for-profits where they can directly take the value of the ITC as basically a cash incentive. There's the ITC, which is the investment tax credit, reducing a federal tax income liability for the percentage of the cost of a qualifying system. This is applicable to a lot of different technologies, combined heat and power for the first 5 years, geothermal, solar, wind, and then there's also a production tax credit. The production tax credit works a little bit differently where it's a payment per kilowatt hour. We like to do a side-by-side evaluation of what's better. So getting paid per kilowatt hour of production over 10 years or taking an all upfront ITC lump sum. Based on the CapEx of a lot of these projects, we found that the ITC is usually better. The 179 tax deduction on energy efficiency in commercial buildings. This has been available to building owners for a number of years. There is, I know the next speaker is going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on 179D tax deductions. This is, it's a benefit that is based on square foot. There's a sliding scale depending on efficiency measure. This is also now open for not-for-profits as well as the traditional commercial building owners who have been taking advantage of it for a number of years already. But you can apply for a specific building every 3 years, every 4 years if it's government-owned, tribal, or not-for-profit. And we're going to go through a high-level look at the Con Ed Clean Heat program. The first thing I can say about the Con Ed Clean Heat program is it's really meant to incentivize electrification, and there's not nearly enough money available in this program to do all of the work that we're seeing coming up in the pipeline. So we believe that this program is going to be evaluated by the PSC for an extension and advancement of additional funds. The eligible customer types are all of the sort of traditional customers you would expect in C&I, active electricity account, paying into SBC, 100 kW demand on average for a rolling 12 months. Any new construction program has to submit an application for Con Edison electric service. So it has to be a new service in order to go down the route of new construction. Eligible construction types are, brand new construction if you're doing ground source, heat pumps, gut renovations, and existing building retrofits. Heat pump technologies have to provide space heating or hot water heating. We're seeing a lot of building owners breaking out their thermal loads and addressing domestic hot water as separate from space heating and doing electrification in a phased way. So a number of our clients are breaking out domestic hot water and other non-space heating thermal requirements and moving towards electrification with those smaller loads. You cannot install your equipment before you get that very special letter, which is your notice to proceed. You're given 24 months on an install timeline. They're not doing heat pump to heat pump replacement projects, and they will not incentivize cooling only. There are a variety of technologies that are fitting into this program, from VRF systems to central air source heat pumps, the ductless mini split, ground source heat pumps, water heating, package terminal heat pumps. All of these listed technologies are eligible for the money, and the incentive caps can be up to 100% on an individual measure, 50% of a total project, and it's capped at $1 million. And that's per account for all projects. The application project process and documentation is a very similar process to all of the other C&I work. Some of the load calculations are a little bit more intense. We have seen on some of the smaller projects that the equipment cut sheets are pretty specific. We have one client who has been trying to electrify a pretty small commercial office building, and the equipment cut sheets keep getting returned. So they're quite picky about the type of certification for the equipment cut sheets. But other than that, it is a fairly straightforward process. These are the categories and rates in terms of the incentive per MMBTU, new construction, existing buildings on ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, whether you're doing the full load space heating, a custom full load space heating, which is tier 1 envelope, custom full load space heating envelope on a tier 2 basis, custom hot water heating, and the C&I partial load space heat applications. And by creating these subcategories, Con Edison is trying to be flexible to wrap their arms around all of the different ways that building owners might try to slice and dice the different loads in a building and provide incentives for any element that a building owner wishes to carve out and electrify. The heat pump models and the certification standards that are listed here in terms of the AHRI, this is where we're having some challenges on the smaller projects, that they don't have these certifications, and we're getting completely cut out of the incentive projects. So we're working with Con Ed to expand this a little bit. Your existing fossil fuel system has to be decommissioned, cut and capped. There cannot be any sort of fossil system remaining as a backup. Some building owners are pushing back on this as it is potentially a reliability issue. And it's one of the issues that is keeping building owners from doing a full electrification conversion with space heating. I think a lot of building owners are extremely concerned with reliability of power in the winter, and the possibility of a winter power outage being even more dangerous than a hot summer outage. PACE financing is the Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing program. This is something that is available to building owners where you can take a project and you can finance it over 25 years at a subsidized rate. And it basically comes through the way that a property tax bill would be paid. It offers an extremely long-term fixed rate financing. It can cover up to 100% of upfront project costs. It can also be used as a bridge between financing. So if you need a loan to get a project through initiation and design, a PACE loan can serve that purpose as well. PACE loans get repaid through a property tax bill. The PACE loans are transferable when ownership of different buildings is changed. And this is a program sponsored by the Mayor's Office of Sustainability. It's administered by the New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation, also the New York City Department of Finance. It's helpful to have the backing of those kinds of agencies when you're talking to a building owner about financing. It comes with a sort of additional level. Yeah.
PACE is always viewed as like this is going to be the magic sauce. What are the numbers? How many PACE loans are actually out there? Dollars.
I don't know the number of loans that are out there, but I do know of at least 2 that are over 50 million each. So the number of loans may be small, but the dollars are big. I can definitely follow up. So I don't think there is any magic sauce. This is one ingredient that might go into the magic sauce. It's a nice option for a building owner to have, and especially a not-for-profit who's looking for a financing mechanism that doesn't have a mortgage on their property, which a lot of not-for-profits do not. This offers a really great solution and access to capital in an expedited way that we've had a number of meetings with CFOs of large not-for-profits about all of the different financing that's out there, whether you're talking about on-bill financing, PPAs, energy as a service, D-Boom. PACE financing is the one that resonates with the most attractiveness.
So my question is, well, people talk about it, but what's the reality of the numbers that have been actually shown and done? We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to one specific PACE loan that I'm super familiar with that was like right around the $50 million mark on a series of buildings downtown that needed like absolute gut renovation, rehab, and full infrastructure renewal. And it was a for-profit, that one.
Is Is there any cap on the loan amount? Is there any cap on the loan amount?
A gap?
Cap in
Oh,
the-
a cap? No. No, but you do have to find a counterparty who is, I mean, PACE isn't, you're not borrowing from the government, you're borrowing from a qualified PACE lender. It's subsidized by the government. So you need to have a counterparty who's comfortable with the value that's being driven by the project. So yeah, no special sauce there either. And the PACE lending process in terms of the application is fairly straightforward, but it takes time. It takes significant time to get through all of the sort of checkpoints and get to your approval. It can finance, in addition to all of the different projects on electrification, decarbonization, it can also finance things like asbestos abatement, lead mitigation, and all of the soft project costs from permitting to design. Qualified borrowers are commercial, industrial, multifamily, but also not-for-profits like hospitals.
How many PACE qualified lenders are there?
Can you repeat that question?
How many PACE qualified lenders are out there?
Currently?
We know of about 16 lenders. There could be more, but in terms of the projects that we've been involved with and some of the counterparties that we've met with, probably about 16.
Can I build on that question?
Yeah.
How many PACE projects have been funded so far?
So that's similar to the question of how many PACE loans are out there. So the dollar amounts out there are a lot higher than the number of PACE loans, keeping in mind that this was made available as part of this legislation in 2019. And there was a period of time when PACE lending was suspended in New York.
From my experience, I've tried working with PACE lenders and introducing to my customers. New York City is much more difficult to get lien waivers because the bank has to go to second position.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I would love to hear from you, your perspective. Connecticut was very successful with PACE.
Mm-hmm.
New York City clearly is struggling to get PACE off the ground.
Yes.
Also, the size of the projects of the 16 PACE lenders, I've called all of them. No one's interested in projects that are, let's say, 150,000, 200,000. Everyone generally wants $500,000 and up.
Correct.
So I would love to hear your perspective of why you think PACE has not taken off as maybe Connecticut did 5 years ago, et cetera.
So there are a number of reasons, and I'll just tell you what I think. I think that real estate values are more stable in Connecticut, and I think that there is a level of uncertainty and instability that makes mortgage lenders on properties in New York City more uncomfortable with taking that second position, so when you do a PACE loan, your primary mortgage holder becomes subordinate and PACE moves into that top sort of position that if something goes wrong and there's liability, the PACE lender is going to get paid before the mortgage holder. The mortgages also tend to be higher because the values are higher, even though they're more unstable. And so that is more risk, more premium, more difficulty. And for those smaller projects, 150,000 to 500,000, a building owner is probably better off doing something through the Green Bank, the Retrofit Accelerator, those, the Energy Efficiency Corporation. They're sort of built for those smaller. Also, like on-bill financing, traditional ESCO turnkey development with on-bill financing is probably a good option for a building owner who's got a $250,000 project. But PACE, so the one PACE loan that I think of first was $50 million to one building owner. That's what the PACE community is chasing. They're definitely not looking to do, 100 projects at the $250,000 level. In terms of the federal and local policy trends, we're seeing cities across the country, Boston has BERDO, Washington DC has its own version. We have local law 97. We're seeing a number of cities across the country move in a similar direction. At the state level, there are so many states now that are public with their greenhouse gas emission targets and commitments. California is out there. There's Maryland, there is Massachusetts, New York. There is a lot of tossing around of the term net zero. A lot of talk about electrify and decarbonize, offset with renewables. There is a struggle between bringing in renewables and making sure that they are reliable. We're seeing a lot of developments now with energy storage, moving away from lithium ion. I think New York City Fire Department just issued their first permit to operate on an energy storage battery system inside a building, non-lithium ion technology. Energy efficiency, which has always been sort of the bread and butter. We're seeing a lot of expansion of incentive programs that are moving away from fossil fuel technology in favor of these building electrification projects. And then we're seeing a big transformation in the transportation sector. So a lot of legislation coming on mandatory EV charging stations in any new construction project, on the sale of EVs. Massachusetts and California have both implemented bans on the sale of new gasoline or diesel powered vehicles. New York has done the same. And we're working with building owners to try to figure out how to balance the added load from all of the EV charging and the transition of fleets from traditional fossil over to EV with building reliability and then ongoing operating costs and demand charges. Any additional questions?
The chat from Corey Letcher Train, is PACE reopened in New York City? I recall PACE was suspended as recently as last year.
Yes, PACE was suspended and it is reopened, but it has been a clumsy launch, to say the least. But it is open now.
Do you anticipate lawsuits that are counter to policy goals of the state right now and the city to succeed? Specifically, the co-op condo joint lawsuit against Local Law 97. I think I came a little late. I think you mentioned the California gas ban, federal. You see that? How do you see that playing out here?
I see it as a minor ripple. It doesn't appear to have a lot of steam. It doesn't appear to have a lot of support. It hasn't even served to really slow anything down. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Now, how do I get Josh on?
Okay, Jed, he should just jump himself. He should share his screen.
Josh, can you share your screen?
I certainly will. There, did it come up? Oh, good.
Okay, great. So our next speaker is Josh Steinmetz from Eide Bailey, which is a fairly large accounting and business advisory firm. Josh is a PE, has CEM credentials, and he leads Eide Bailey's 179D commercial building tax deduction team. He's a professional engineer licensed in 24 states, and he's an AEE certified energy manager with over 20 years of experience. In addition to managing the 179D team, he ensures that each prospective 179D building receives a thorough and accurate site visit and provides engineering analysis for the challenging building systems that they encounter. I just wanted to say also, I don't know how many of you know Josh, but I think he was a little bit modest when he provided his credentials to me, because he did have, did work for Con Edison for 10 years. And I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that background as well. And I'm going to turn the program over to him.
Okay. Thanks so much, Phyllis, and I appreciate that introduction. And also thank you, Jennifer, for that great content too. As Jennifer mentioned, I am going to give a little more detail as to some of the energy incentives that are part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And let's see here. So yeah, as mentioned, I did work at Con Ed for 10 years. I started as an MEP engineer, then a project manager, then took a slight pivot into the energy services performance contracting world. So I did work for the Con Edison clean energy businesses for about 10 years. Now I work at an accounting firm, which I was reminded of earlier today because I got an exuberant email at 5:18 p.m. Eastern time saying that 2022 tax season is officially over. Let's go drink. So, got that today, and this is, yeah, it's very much a happy time for accountants these days. So today, yeah, we'll talk about the energy incentive program, the different elements that are enhanced, extended, and introduced as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. We're going to focus mostly on residential credits, commercial building tax deductions, and then the production investment energy credits that Jennifer also mentioned. We'll do a little more detail on that. So also, as Jennifer mentioned, the Congressional Budget Office predicts that these three big pieces of legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and the CHIPS Act, which is to promote semiconductor production, they're estimating, the CBO estimated $374 billion, but these incentives seem to be significant enough. They are really moving the needle for people as far as acting and producing in a particular way to take advantage of those incentives, because they're already predicting now that it's going to be more like 800 billion. I've seen some other estimates that it might even be more than that, because most of these are not capped. And I think as people see the lucrative nature of some of these incentives, a lot more people are going to take advantage of it. So what the Inflation Reduction Act did was, again, Jennifer mentioned this, but it's 10 years of materiality, which means that from 2023 to 2032, we know this is going to be part of the legislation, and developers, yeah, they can have some certainty in that and make decisions accordingly, rather than when it was introduced in 2005 as part of EPACT, there was always a sunset provision. So in other words, Congress had to opt in over and over again to get this to continue. Whereas now, I mean, conceivably it could change, but they will have to opt out, which is a little more of a hurdle to kind of cross there. And then 10 years of certainty, in little parentheses there, it says eventually. There are a few things that we are waiting on guidance for from the IRS, because as you might guess, this legislation was written pretty quickly. So every single I was not dotted, T was not crossed. So there are still some questions, but they are in the process of figuring those out. So as we kind of look at what we think of as the the climate economy. There are three main legislative acts in the middle there. The ones I mentioned, the CHIPS Semiconductor, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then the Infrastructure Act. And there is a huge list of things that businesses and designers, which I'll get to shortly, can take advantage of with this. And we'll be focusing on the renewable energy and the energy efficiency bubbles. So traditionally with buildings in particular, facility engineers and their design team, be it external or internal, generally had the most sway because they were the ones who were most qualified to determine the systems that would be best managed, or that the building that would serve the buildings the best. But now with all these incentives, and also just a kind of desire for a lot of companies to show that they are stewards of the environment and that they are quote unquote going green, leadership is involved in a lot of this too. And then also the accountants get in on it as well to see kind of future net present values and then future benefits as you install some of these energy efficient technologies and renewables. So you've got a large number of people that now want to have a say in these sorts of investments. So we'll start with the residential tax credit. It is section 45L. That's just the section of the tax code. And for developers who are building new homes, when they sell those, and assuming that these homes are built to an Energy Star standard, they can receive this 45L credit. Also, developers who are building multifamily units, such as apartments and dorms and senior living and things like that, they can also take advantage of that credit. The specifications on this, they've kind of changed more to, as mentioned, the Energy Star notes on that. And you'll see that on the single family and manufactured homes, you're looking at a $2,500 credit per unit, and then it jumps up to $5,000. Now that's for a zero energy ready home. Most homes don't clear that threshold, but if they do, they can get up to a $5,000 credit. When you hop down to the multifamily, that's where you see it splits into two categories there. There's a base credit of $500 per unit or $1,000 if, again, it's zero energy ready home. But then there's a bonus credit. Now that bonus credit is a multiplier of 5. So you can get 5 times as much credit if you meet prevailing wage standards and apprenticeship requirements. As mentioned, there was a little uncertainty on that, and we haven't been given exact instructions on how best to, how to make sure that we qualify on that. But I'm assuming that that guidance is coming here pretty soon. For the most part, I think in most cases, especially with state and government work, usually Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage have to be followed anyway for government jobs. So in most cases, those will qualify there. So this is just a case study here. It's a senior living complex, and some of the things, most of these for the 45L credit are prescriptive. In other words, you go into whichever climate zone the building's located in, and you have minimum specifications. And when you model it all together, does it exceed the Energy Star listed standard? If yes, you qualify. If not, then back to the drawing board. You might be able to put in a different type of air conditioning system or something like that. In this particular case, 100% of the units passed, and that's usually what's going to happen because typically it's going to be similar building materials and similar equipment in each unit there. So one thing that I know we do is when we do these qualifications ahead of time is we can do these really quickly. It's just a matter of knowing what climate zone you're in and then determining what the building code is for that area, and then figuring out what your target efficiencies are to make sure that a building will qualify, or an apartment building or a home will qualify for those credits. So in other words, in summary, you're looking at $500 for a multifamily unit that is not prevailing wage and also not zero energy, all the way up to $5,000 for a zero energy ready home or multifamily unit with the multifamilies that do have the prevailing wage requirements. Prior to now, up through the end of 2022, 45L only pertained to low-rise residential buildings. In other words, 3 stories or less. Going forward, it pertains to all residential building, regardless of height. which leads to some interesting things because this particular credit can also be paired with other deductions, as we'll discuss here in a moment. These credits have to be taken in the tax year during which the buildings are placed in service. When we do these projects, we typically look at least 10 units, and it's just because the numbers pencil out better, the amount of labor and the site visit and everything that are required to verify and document these things. That's just kind of where a good mutually beneficial point is. And then we just kind of take it from there. And yeah, if you're working on anything residential, that's definitely a good place to start is with that 45L credit. So moving on to commercial buildings, section 179D is actually a deduction, and it's available for any sort of projects, whether it's new construction or any retrofits that include HVAC, hot water, building envelopes, so windows, doors, roofs, etc., or lighting projects. And that deduction is now up to $5 per square foot. For private building owners, if you say you build a new facility and you have a company and you build a 100,000 square foot warehouse, you can take that deduction now on a new building, or if you make a significant improvement, you can take it on a retrofit as well. It's capped by the total cost of project. So if you put in $1 million, that would be your maximum cap. This is good for owners or yes, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Okay. So as a private building owner, this is a deduction, and effectively it's
Why don't we wait till the end?
sorry. Oh, you're good. So this is effectively it is an accelerated depreciation for a private building owner. So it is an ability to take the tax deduction for the entire cost of the property up to the maximum per square foot, prior to letting it depreciate over up to 39 years. The one big change from the Inflation Reduction Act is it used to be each building, you could take this deduction once over its life. Now, after 3 years, you can take it again. So in other words, if you have a building that you acquire and you get the 179D deduction, and then later on you do a significant retrofit, let's say you replace some boilers or put in new lights, you can take that 179D deduction again if it qualifies from an energy efficiency standpoint. I'm guessing that most of you would probably be more interested in the designer provision. And the way that works is if you are working on a tax exempt entity, traditionally it's been government entities only, but with the Inflation Reduction Act, it also includes Indian tribal lands and other tax exempt entities such as non-for-profit hospitals, religious organizations, etc. If you are an architect or an engineer or a contractor that provides either specifications or plans for the design of one of these energy efficient projects, that deduction can actually be allocated to you via the nonprofit. Since it is a deduction, these non-taxable entities aren't paying tax, so therefore they don't have a burden against which they can deduct those taxes. So those can be allocated to designers, including architects, engineers, and contractors. And typically we can go back as far as 2020, now that this tax year is kind of rolling over, to amend returns and even go back that far and get that deduction. So as far as the qualification, yeah.
Can I interrupt? Can I ask you a question in regards to 179? So again, this is accelerated depreciation, correct?
Yes, if you're a private building owner, that's effectively what it is. Yes.
And so instead of the building having a 39-year depreciation, you're taking this up to $5 per square foot depreciation in the year that you're asking for the 179D reduction, correct?
That's correct, yes. Yeah. If you qualify as a designer, there is no depreciation because the designer doesn't own any property. So if you're functioning as a designer for a nonprofit, then it's effectively just a tax deduction against your income.
But if you're the building owner, you're accelerating the depreciation, and then because this is not a credit but a deduction, then you're subject. Then the credit is effectively at your tax rate.
Correct, yes. So it would, there is some strategizing that can go on in that situation. For example, if you're in a high income year, you might delay it until that year and take it then. But yeah, that's exactly how it works. It would be dependent upon your marginal tax rate. So it's more lucrative if you're paying 35% versus if you're paying 10 or 15. For sure.
Okay, is there any other interesting aspects of how to take that deduction if you're the building owner? And again, so you're suggesting you take it in the year that you have the most taxed income.
Yes, and you do have to place the equipment in service that year. So you'd kind of have to do some scheduling, and a lot of times building improvements don't wait. They wait for nobody. So sometimes you're stuck. It is dependent upon when you place that equipment in service.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So hypothetically, if a contractor electrified domestic hot water for a former NYCHA complex, which is the equivalent of a nonprofit, the contractor who installed the heat pumps can take depreciation effectively as a retroactive deduction on their income?
Yes, it
Worked with
doesn't.
NYCHA, wait, having worked at NYCHA and tried the 179D, you must get, at the time, you must have gotten the consent of NYCHA to do it.
Oh,
That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, that being said, some developers did it, and wasn't sanctioned or legal, or not legal, that's the wrong word. So, but we actually tried 179D.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so yes, that is a particular of it. If you're the designer of that building, then it doesn't really operate as depreciation because you don't own the equipment that would effectively be depreciated if it were a private situation. So it is just a straight up deduction, but there is an allocation method that has to happen. You have to have a letter from that entity saying, yes, this company can have the deduction that we have. And that's mostly for paperwork. And it also keeps from having multiple entities trying to claim that deduction. So it's a paper trail, and it's to make sure that everything is operating as intended with that allocation.
And Josh, have you ever run into a situation where you had two entities request a deduction or any other special circumstance?
Only once.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a situation where there was an architecture firm and an MEP firm, and they were both working at a school district, and there was a major corporate falling out there. So the architect had already claimed it, but the MEP firm happened to be actually one of our accounting clients. So they came in and they said, yeah, well, we've heard about 179D, we'd like to know more. And we said, yeah, we'd be happy to help you. And when we looked into it, we talked to the district finance officer, and he said, I think we did something like this already. And sure enough, he had a letter from the previous year. So they didn't miss it by much, but he had a letter from the previous year. The architect had gone ahead and claimed that without telling the MEP engineer. So, it's very rare. It's only happened once that I know of. There are also situations where companies with good working relationships split the deduction. So I've had situations where the MEP engineer and the architect split it 50-50, and that's totally fine. The letter just says 50% goes here and 50% goes there, and it works out that way as long as there's an agreement on those parties. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve. So jump quick.
Thank you.
So, sure thing. So as far as qualification, traditionally up until the end of 2022, prior to the Inflation Reduction Act's implementation, you're looking at envelope, HVAC, hot water, and lighting as the three elements that make up a potential retrofit. Now, a qualifying project could include just one of those. It could include all three, but the only way you can qualify is if you do a lighting project, then you can, prior to 2023, the deduction was only worth $1.80, $1.82 in 2021, $1.88 in 2022 with inflation, cost of living adjustment. But you could only get a third of that for each element, or if you had a whole building that you modeled and it was 50% better than the applicable ASHRAE 90.1 standard, then you could qualify for that full deduction. Now that seems like a pretty high bar to clear. And it's going forward with 2023, they're changing the methodology for the modeling a little bit. So if you could save 25% over the ASHRAE 90.1 baseline that's in effect, base deduction 50 cents, and then that 5 times multiplier for prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements jumps it to 250. It goes on a sliding scale. For each percentage you save up to 50%, that deduction could be worth up to $5. So again, it seems like it's a pretty high bar to clear. I think anyone who's worked in like energy services thinks, man, 50%, that requires some serious renovation. But the reason it's, at least for the time being, not as onerous and a requirement as it sounds, well, they're using the 2007 standard for the next several years. And if you look at this map, most states in the union are better than 2007 or more stringent than 2007. Some of them have even adopted 2019 as their standard. So the way that they're using this is if you go back on a private building from 2006 to 2015, they're using 2001 as the standard. And from now until 2026, we did actually get IRS guidance on this. 2026, we're still using the 2007 standard. Now, that'll change a little bit. It'll be a little bit harder to meet, a lot harder to meet once you hit 2027. But from now until the end of 26, you're just going against that 2007 standard. I've seen estimates that 2019 is going to be about 37% more efficient. So that's going to make our jobs more difficult in getting that qualification. But when you go through, you're looking at performance ratings of just these items here: interior lighting, heating, cooling, ventilation, hot water. Anything that's a plug load, any exterior lighting, anything like that does not get included in those savings calculations. So we basically do a benchmark building versus the actual building in terms of those elements. And from there, you could see when you go through all these different elements here, we came up with a 43.8% savings. Doesn't quite get you the full deduction unless you strip out refrigeration, external usage, and miscellaneous equipment. Any process or plug load gets completely out of there. So you're taking the same savings, but from a smaller baseline, and that's how you get up over 50% in a lot of cases. So it is just those building energy users, not anything with processes. So going back to, this is just a case study here. This was an office building with retail on the bottom. We had some nice efficient boilers, good efficiency on the cooling, and then modern lighting with LED and occupancy sensors. Another thing with 2007, they're based everything on T8s then. So now, with LED and occupancy sensors, this particular building did qualify for a $5 per square foot deduction. So, that's a pretty sizable chunk of change there, $875,000 for their new headquarters. So yeah, again, up to $5 a square foot, and the designers can take advantage of that. In this case, this was an elementary school. New boilers and chillers, new DDC controls, and demand control ventilation. This is prior to the IRA, so the cap was $1.80 a square foot. Even so, that's a nice healthy deduction there for I think this one was for the architect, and then this one, I'm sorry, that one was for the mechanical engineer. This was for the architect. New construction on a regional fine arts center. Really solid roof and wall construction and windows and everything. Pretty good HVAC, but then really good lighting and efficiency there. That one again, pre-IRA, $1.80 per square foot there. So it's a pretty lucrative thing. And now that other nonprofit entities are eligible for this, this was a big hospital and residential area. Again, good boiler, 0.5 kilowatt per ton on the chillers, and good lighting. And this is a big facility. I mean, 625,000 square feet, but I mean, that's a $3.1 million deduction. So it really does add up. And that is just from the 179D deduction. So in summary, $5 a square foot is the max on that. Anything private can be is anything placed in service after 2005, and then tax exempt entities. Any government owned, you can go back to any tax year. So if you did a school district, let's say, and you did it in 2021, you can still take that. It does require an amended return, but it's really not that much work. For nonprofit, for things like hospitals, religious organizations, et cetera, that are not government owned, that's anything starting right now to 2032. We usually look at buildings that are 25,000 square feet. It's just where it pencils out the best. So getting into energy incentive program, you've got the 179D. In a lot of cases, these exempt organizations are getting pretty savvy, and they understand that these deductions are there. If you do want to enter an agreement to share that deduction, it is completely between the two parties that are involved. There has to be a third-party professional engineer. When we do these, that's what we serve as someone who is independently certifying that these buildings qualify. This can be sometimes the exempt organization will say, hey, we'll how about a credit for future work or something like that? And designers, it's their discretion. It's also the exempt organization's discretion as to whether they sign the allocation letter. So a lot of times there can be some negotiation there. In terms of just the pure allocation of that deduction, it can only go to the designer since the organization's tax exempt in that case. So we'll move on to section 48. These are energy credits. So we're back from deductions to credits, and Jennifer talked about several of these technologies. So most of the engineers, you're gonna be familiar with most of these technologies. The very basic credit, you get 6% of cost for that investment. The wage rules, again, we're back to prevailing wage, multiplies it by 5, gets up to 30%. And then there are domestic content rules, just meaning that the steel, iron, or other manufactured products are produced in the United States. You get that 10% bonus. And also, as mentioned previously, the energy community situation. Usually it's like a coal town or an oil town, a lot of times, that are transitioning away from those fuels and maybe not don't have as many facilities in use at that time. So and also, this has already been covered. You got production tax credits. That's a payment per kilowatt hour produced, or investment tax credit, which is the cost of the actual technology. And certainly do the math beforehand, see how it's going to pencil out the best for you. Everyone knows what solar panels are. You can use any solar as long as it is not used to heat a swimming pool. For some reason, that is an exemption from the solar technology. Geothermal, ground source heat pumps, also, they can be used for both space cooling or hot water. Small scale wind energy, I think those turbines might be a little bit past the spec, but yeah, you're talking about small, like demonstration level or small local production wind energy, no more than 100 kilowatts per turbine. Fuel cells, they're starting to happen now. I mean, it is, we've heard about them forever, and now they are starting to kind of be implemented. And the thing is that the eligibility is so low, like the bar is so low for these to qualify. 0.5 kilowatt for a stack assembly and 1 kilowatt for a linear generator assembly. So yeah, if anything you're working on has those, be sure to make sure to apply for those credits. Cogen, same thing. You got a heat load year round, or an absorption chiller, or doing some peak shaving. Great opportunity there. Waste energy recovery. This is a lot of industrial places. So if you've got a manufacturing facility, let's say they're firing ovens or kilns, or chemical plant that has exothermic processes, if you can recover that heat, there's really no minimum or efficiency requirement on that. It's just if you install the equipment, that credit's available. Microgrid controllers. A lot of areas are looking for grid resiliency. Anything between a 4 kilowatt and 20 megawatt microgrid, these controllers qualify for a credit as well. Energy storage, you're putting in a battery array, or in this case, like a chilled water to do some peak shaving. That qualifies as well. Biogas, Pretty much your requirement there is you got a digester and the gas has to be at least 52% methane, and it can be gas for use or gas for sale. So combining all of these here, one thing that you can do is, for example, this is a kind of a case study too, a behavioral health center renovation. They added thermal energy storage. They actually added a small chilled water tank to do some peak shaving, and also took advantage of the fact that they were able to get that clean energy investment credit. So they got a 179D deduction and a clean energy investment credit. So 300,000 in credit, 500,000 in deduction. A lot of these things are stackable, and that's what's so lucrative about them. And I think it's why a lot more people are interested in them now. Another thing, senior living. It's a high-rise, 200,000 square foot facility. They have a ground source heat pump system installed. So they get the clean energy investment credit for the geothermal, 45L credit for being residential, and 179D deduction for it being a high-rise residential. And there's even a utility sales tax exemption that's beyond the purview of this call. But I mean, it really adds up quickly. So I think that's what I'd like to leave you with, is just that you've got your credits for renewables, and then you've got your residential buildings that can receive credits, and then you've got commercial buildings where you can receive deductions. So all of these things can add up. They can benefit certainly the owners of the buildings, but I think a lot of cases, especially like in the ESCO world, there is a lot of opportunity there to work with school districts, and doing so much with universities, school districts, hospitals, municipalities. There's an opportunity there to really have a really good outcome for, I think, for both sides involved there. So anyway, I know that was a lot. That was a lot of slides. So yeah, if anyone any questions, anything you want to ask about any of these programs.
Are energy management systems a qualified technology?
They are a qualified, yeah, they're a qualified project if you're doing the 179D deduction, yes. Yeah, they fall into the HVAC category, so all of that cost can go into the amount that you base your deduction and your project cost off of.
I don't mean to be too specific, but is it only for EMS for HVAC applications, or also, let's say there's a steam building in your city, steam heat, you're putting in EMS in to control the central heating plant of the building? Do you know if there's any nuance there, or it's just
okay.
EMS is okay?
Yeah, I mean, EMS is certainly okay. And in the case, are you talking about like a central steam plant?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are doing work to that central steam plant and you're putting in controllers that make the boiler system and the steam system more efficient, you can actually take it for that steam plant, but also all the buildings for which it improves the energy efficiency. Actually working on a project like that right now at a VA campus, and they put in a huge new central steam plant that's going to serve most of their campus. And yes, all the buildings that are served by that steam loop also qualify, or also potentially qualify.
And only qualifies for the 179D, not for the tax credit.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Because for the tax credit, that like controls aren't part of the technologies that get those tax credits. But yeah, it does do the 179D deduction. And if you did any of the other technologies with renewables, that would also qualify and/or qualify for the Section 48, which was like the third big item that I talked about.
Thank you.
Good thing.
Any other questions in the room?
Can you send out these slides?
Oh, we are going to send out the slides.
Yes.
We don't send out the slides. The
They
slides
go up on,
posted on the chapter website. If you go to past meetings, give us volunteers, so give us a week or two to get those up.
Josh, can you stop sharing your screen so we can see if there are any questions in the
Good
chat?
thing, yeah. Come on, where's my maximize the screen thing? Okay. I'm trying,
It's
my
okay.
Zoom window basically disappeared on me.
You got it, Josh. We can
Most of the comments are the fact that, most of the comments are that we were muted in the beginning, so that's not surprising.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, two questions were actually for Jennifer about
Oh,
pace.
okay.
So, not for Josh.
Well, I can answer that.
Okay,
first one.
okay, great.
The first question about whether PACE is reopened in New York City, the answer is yes, that there were regulations that were put in place, I believe, last summer or sometime around last summer. So it is in place, and I think Jennifer mentioned that it's the New York City EEC, I think, is the agency that actually handles it.
EEC.
Okay.
Second question, something.
NICE. NICE,
Yeah, New York Energy.
Efficiency Corporation.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Josh. And really, thanks to Jennifer had left because she had to make a ferry, but I want to thank both speakers that did an excellent job. And I'm going to turn it back over to Craig.
Thank you, Phyllis, and to our speakers. And we'll see everyone at the May meeting, and we will also send out an announcement about the gala. And I think one last announcement was scholarships. We have the date for scholarship eligibility has been extended. So if you go to the website, and I think there's an email blast going out.
Email blast tomorrow about the awards. People didn't hear you because you're on mute the first time.
Yes, for the people that are on virtually, an email is going out tomorrow about chapter awards. If you have an exceptional engineer or a project or a facility that would be eligible for recognition, please let us know. Same thing with scholarships to deserving people who are looking to continue education in this field. We have an opportunity for that as well. Also, please bus yourselves so that we don't have to clean up after everyone, and look forward to seeing everyone in May. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Great. Look at yourself. I'm up there a lot, right? No, you're not speaking something like that.
Did you pre-register?
Really happy to see those all the way.